You're Mike Metzger, fellow Chautauquan. Many of your neighbors have shown up tonight to show their support, or otherwise, I don't know why they came here, but there they are. So give them a little bit of your biography or autobiography, because they may not know. They only know is you, a guy that lives over here in the North Shore.
Well, Carol and Bob were surprised because this is one of my exercise nights. So I'm generally not wearing a tie. But my background is predominantly working in manufacturing. I worked at places as obscure as Kelox Manufacturing, Eastman Kodak, Bausch & Lomb, then worked for a German company for 25 years, then ran a sheet metal manufacturing company, and then decided that thanks to my wife, on a February snowy afternoon at Smith Library, it's Sunday, she said, "Here's your dream job." She found it in the New York Times, and it was the current position that I'm in at SUNY Fredonia. So we had always loved Chautauqua, and we're fortunate enough to move to Chautauqua, but we can't, the problem that we have is we can't keep up with our neighbors. They are amazing. I mean, Bob and Carol and John and Juanita will look out the window, and Ralph, he's running and going, and we'll say, "We're exhausted. We can't, we're done for the day," and they're just beginning. So they've really shown us that to keep learning, to keep moving, and to keep active. So we only hope to aspire to lead as active and productive lives as they have.
You've always been a part of the community. Aside from that professional career, which you just listed, could you just highlight a few of your civic highlights?
Well, I was fortunate enough when I came here that I had a boss by the name of Ron Masucci who allowed me to work in the community. And I've ran the United Way campaign, been the president of the United Way, president of the American Red Cross, was with the Resource Center on the board, president and treasurer for many years. So in Rotary, I was able to do a lot of human service activities, which I truly enjoyed. So that provided me with a little bit of the experience and insight into, hopefully, the higher ed position that I have currently.
You also found your way at some point being on the board, being asked to be on the board of the County of Chautauqua Industrial Development Agency. How did that happen? I'm not sure I even know.
Well, that actually happened because we needed money and we needed to get a bond. And
when you say we, you mean your corporation?
The corporation.
Not you and Marge. They don't get paid. They're volunteers.
We're volunteers. The company I was working for, we were looking for industrial revenue bond financing to build a plant in Mason Industrial Park. Well, nobody had done any for a while, and there was an attorney by the name of Ken Johnson, and he fortunately took me under his wing and walked me through the whole process. Well, once I had completed that, it was, well, you've done this, nobody has done this, so we would like you to come on the board and hopefully help other companies with not only their traditional all-tech loan financing, but to see if they could do industrial revenue bonds. So that's how I started with the IDA probably 15, 20 years ago, I guess it was.
That's a long time.
So who's the chairman of the board then?
The chairman of the board then, when it was just transitioning over to Frank Pagano.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started with Frank, and then under Mike Piazza. Then after Mike retired from the board, I took the chairmanship.
We have Rich Dixon, who, being Carol's husband, Give us a little bit of your autobiography, Rich.
Well, I'll fast forward to the time when I was 11-year-old and we moved to Jamestown.
Oh, no.
My father came to Jamestown for an opportunity to work at automatic voting machine. His cousin was involved with AVM, and he asked my dad. They were both Penn State grads. Sorry, Mike, but I'm a Penn State fan. So
I knew I did.
we came here. My father was the vice president of manufacturing for AVM. At that point in Jamestown, automatic voting machine had a lot of factories in Jamestown. Probably 6 or 7 different factories, employed hundreds of people throughout the community. I can remember distinctly a couple days after my 16th birthday, I was playing baseball like we all do. My birthday's the 4th of July, and I saw my father pull up in the car, and I looked at the guys, and I said, we're going to go get my driver's permit. Well, we went up and got my working papers at the high school, and I started my career in manufacturing, working in different factories, and I fell in love with it immediately. I mean, I enjoyed it. I tried college for 1 year after high school. Wasn't really thriving there. I went to work in the family business. At that time, my father had bought a wood factory in Bradford, Pennsylvania. So I spent 4 or 5 years with him. I worked in Germany, and that job traveled quite a bit in that. Really enjoyed it. And then when that ended, I went back to college, and that's when I met my wife. I was in college. I have to confess, I met Carol in a bar, though we weren't at the same college. And then after college, my first job was at Lutheran Social Services, and that's where I met you, Greg. I had my accounting degree in finance, business administration finance. I ended up getting my nursing home administrator's license. I'm a licensed nursing home administrator. I moved on from that. I worked at Jamestown Community College. And then I went to work for the Private Industry Council, which I enjoyed. It was, unfortunately, at that time, it was half good but half bad. You were dealing with the layoffs in companies. And when this opportunity arose and I came, I just love it. I mean, the Industrial Development Agency does a lot more than industrial work, but I just enjoy going into the factories. I've always been amazed at what the human body and the human mind can make. And we have some fabulous places there. As George will tell you, as we've been to 65 businesses since he got elected, a lot of them manufacturers, to know that you're something that's made in Chautauqua County on the space shuttle. It's used in the bombs, it's used in almost everything. It's amazing what's manufactured here. And that's what gets me going. I like to get up every day. I love to walk the shop floors because that's where I started, and to see the workers. I mean, for example, even in my 12 years at Cummins Engine, used to be not a dirty place, but it was a manufacturing facility. Now, I mean, you walk in, the floors are spotless. The lighting is LEDs. You could wear a white shirt because you're looking at a monitor on a screen. You're not hand turning dials and gauges. It's high-tech manufacturing here. And I just love that. I love working in that field.
So what's your interface with the IDA? How did you get connected with them?
Bill Daley had called me. Greg Edwards had just won the election. I knew Greg. I didn't know Bill at all. And Bill called me one February day, and I think a good friend of mine,
Bill Daley was the head of the IDA.
Bill Daley had just been appointed as the IDA director, and he said he was going to need a chief financial officer. I got a call from John Lloyd, who I knew quite well in my days. John had a CPA firm in Jamestown, and he called me and said, "Congratulations, Daley offered you the job." And I said, "Well, he didn't offer it to me yet, but thanks for the tip, John." He gave me a little negotiating room. But so that's where I met Bill, and we started out. I was there a month, and I know Mike had said that the IDA was interested in taking full control of the Alltech Loan Fund. So one day I got a check in the mail for $4 million and 70 boxes of loan files. So we had to set up the loans, set up the repayments. You did all the collateral work. And a month later, we're taking payments on these loans, and we're collecting it, and we're administering it locally. And that was very exciting for me. It's a fabulous tool. But that's how I got started with Bill.
You're one of the preeminent personalities of the IDA from a staff perspective, the guy that's out front. Where did you get that skill set of working with people and listening so well?
Well, as I left the factory in Bradford with my father, and I went back to college, my father had passed away. I did take a year off. On my resume, it says independent travel and study, and I spent a little time in Fort Lauderdale and in Houston. But when I came back to go to college, I had to work, Greg. So I worked. I went to Fredonia Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 5 classes in a row, and I worked nights, and I was a bartender. So even though on my Myers-Briggs, I'm very introverted, that was an easy job for me to do that, and because it's not really you, it's somebody else, and you're like a showman. So I learned to do that. I managed the bar I worked in, and it was a very busy place, and just learned how to get along with people, and found that if you get along really well with people, you made a lot of money. So in the bar business, that was important. So.
Well, part of our county executives autobiography he talked about was developing certain kind of entertainment glasses at that point. Did you ever use any of it?
I believe we had some of that in our facility, and what he's referring to is in one of George's earlier business, he invented the test tube shots. So I do remember those a little bit. They faded fast, but they were hot for a while, right, George? Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I'm staying with you, Rich. At this point, what's your position?
I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Industrial Development Agency. My degree was in finance. I'm the interim director for another 2 days. George has appointed, as he said, Mark Geis. So I've enjoyed that, helping out for 2.5 months. It's been double duty, but it's been fun. So I administer all the loans. We have 2 separate loan funds. We have $13 million in loan money that we administer. Today was one of the best loan reports we'd ever had. We're doing really well in our loan fund, getting repaid. And, like banks, not all loans make it. We are the lender of the last resort, and we help do deals that wouldn't normally get done. So any banker will tell you that if he makes no bad loans, he won't have a job because he's not taking enough risk. And if he makes too many bad loans, he won't have a job. So somewhere you strike that balance. And we've been very fortunate to preserve the fund, grow the fund, and use that fund as a tool, sometimes just to get into businesses. And I'm so excited about George's philosophy of let's take care of the people we have here. We've been to 65 businesses. There's probably 300 open positions right now. And as George says, what would we do to a company that was coming in here that had 300 jobs? We would do a lot for them. So George's focus on helping the people that are here, I really enjoy, because that's what I love to do. I love to get into the existing facilities and say, how can we help you? What do you need to make it grow? So,
as being the #1 bean counter for the IDA, talk about those 2 funds. You teased us saying there are 2 funds. Could you describe them and really its source of the funding?
Well, the first fund, it's called the All-Tech Trust Fund, and it came about, and you know the history a little better than I do, Greg. I'll get the years wrong here, but back in the 70s, the Department of Commerce loaned $10 million to the steel plant in Dunkirk. At the time, it was the All-Tech steel plant. That money was paid back to the EDA by the steel plant at that time, and the Department of Commerce said, well, why don't you keep this money and start a loan fund? So that loan fund was bifurcated between Albany, New York, and Dunkirk, New York, where the 2 plants were. And that fund, we had about $5 million to start. It went through some good times, went through some bad times. Some of it got lent away probably where it shouldn't, and through no fault of the Jamestown people, but through the New York State was administering it at the time. So that fund currently today, we have about $12.5 million there. Our principal and interest returns at about $162,000 a month. So we have money to lend. And then we have another smaller fund, which is a little riskier, and that money came from the Appalachian Region Commission. A lot of people don't realize it, but we are in Appalachia in Chautauqua County. We are officially federally designated as a part of Appalachia, and there are special funds for counties that are in Appalachia. It's only the 11 counties on the bottom of New York State.
How How fortunate is Chautauqua County to have an LTEC trust fund of in excess of $12 million?
Well, I can think of 4 or 5 companies right off the bat, Greg, that would be gone had that money not been available. And even for me to go to my board of directors, and before I get to my board of directors, I need to get through a loan committee that consists of 5 local bankers, and then the chairman of the board and another member. And Mike will tell you, sometimes it's not easy to get those loans approved. But the one loan that comes to mind, I won't mention the name of the company, but I went 5 separate times with the same loan. And finally I had the 5th meeting at the town club and I bought them lunch. and I remember they said, if you want it that bad, we're going to try it. And we did it. The company has been very successful. They paid their loan back 5 years early and preserved over 120 jobs, and now there's 165 people working there. So it is a valuable tool to help people stay and grow, and also local ownership. I mean, when you're dealing with large companies, they really don't need your capital. I mean, we very large companies wouldn't come to us and ask for a loan. For example, SKF, when they built their heat treat facility, we did lend them some money for the building, but large companies like that aren't looking for loans. But for small companies in Jamestown that are family owned or owned by, in this case, 2 gentlemen that had 70 years of experience in that business, it means a lot. It means a lot, and it's a valuable tool.
To have a fund of that size in a county this small, do you remember the comments that the feds made about having such a large fund?
Well, I was here about a month, and we were summoned to Philadelphia. That's the regional headquarters of the Department of Commerce, the EDA, where we work. And there was a gentleman that I worked with there on the phone quite a bit. His name was Jack Garrity. He's a Philadelphian his whole life. He'd worked there as a CPA. And I remember we walked into the room, Bill Daly and I introduced myself to him, and he yells across the room, he goes, "Joey, come on over here, the guys from Chautauqua are here." I mean, he could never even pronounce Chautauqua, he called it Chautauqua. But we had the largest federal loan fund in the United States at that time. Very fortunate to have that money here. Very fortunate.
So Mike, you're now chairman of the board. You're the policy guy. You're the guy dealing with the board itself. Since the time you've been on the board, have you seen any sort of directional change, any sort of focus, any sort of areas which you have found that the IDA is now into today that maybe they weren't into when you first joined?
Mm-hmm. Well, Rich is humble. When we received these monies from the government, at that time he received spreadsheets. The system was not automated. Not only was the accounting not automated, the bill paying was not automated, and the loan process was not.
Right.
So the first thing that Rich was instrumental, with the assistance of the governance committee and the board, was putting in policies to ensure that we were consistent and objective in the review of these loans. Previously, when they would go to the mothership Albany, as I call it,
JDA,
the JDA, they were down in New York.
New York City. Yeah.
It was very political, and mattered who called, and the process wasn't structured at all. So having these loans being through a very definitive process has improved the quality of our loan portfolio. It also has improved the quality of the loans coming to the IDA, because it forces them to provide us with the correct information,
right,
and the collateral and the business plan, so that we can at least have a much better perspective of moving forward. So the biggest thing that has occurred is that the review of the companies coming forward and their credibility and their ability to repay. Now, yes, we have to look at the jobs, because we have taken some loans basically to just postpone the inevitable, but to ensure that the employees would be paid for a certain period of time. That isn't always the case, but we do have to take some of those loans as we are the last resort. Once they have to prove that they've gone through commercial financing, all alternatives, and we're the only ones that could facilitate their financing. The other that's happened under Rich and the board and moving forward, and especially now into George's tenure as county executive, is we aren't just that industrial development. It's not just the company coming to us that has 5 jobs. We, of course, entertain those, but it's been expanded into any type of economic development, including tourism, hotels, and people always go, well, why are you getting involved in that type of economic development? Well, because it brings not only jobs associated with that industry, but it brings all the ancillary jobs, the construction workers, the suppliers that have to fulfill the needs of these new companies coming in. You know, you look at a company such as Athenix, it's, you know, the old tip of the iceberg. Well, Athenix is going to employ X number of employees, but then 2 times that, other people will be employed in the county, servicing them, supplying Athenix with the products and the services that they need to conduct business. So it really is an exponential effect. So it's essential for the IDA to expand and to get into all these different areas of economic development.
Talk about Athenix. I think that's a tremendous story, case study, as to how it sort of found its way to Chautauqua County. Of all the gin joints in all the world, here we have it in Duncan.
Well, I'll tell you, and then I'm going to start out and I'm going to turn it over to Rich, because I'm part of the Western Regional Economic Development Council, and part of that council is all the economic development agencies of the 5 counties of Western New York. And one of them was they were called the B&E, now they're called
IBM.
So they had a company come to them and they were looking for a place to build. And this was called
Project Little
Apple.
Yep.
So, and then I'm going to turn it over to Rich, because they literally came down here and they had to, the Industrial Development Agency, the county, had to prove to them why it would be essential for them to move this project out of the Buffalo, Niagara County region, which is where all the excitement and all the projects were going, and what could Chautauqua County provide them that Buffalo and Niagara could not.
I'll just interject here, Rich, before you jump in, because a disclosure and a disclaimer. Our firm does a lot of legal work for the County of Chautauqua Industrial Development Agency, and we weekly have staff meetings, and we meet, and for months on end, there would be this item of percolating projects, and it just said
Little Apple.
Little Apple, and nobody knew, including the staff person assigned to it. But so, why don't you pick it up?
Yeah, as Mike talked about, Invest Buffalo Niagara, which was formerly Buffalo Niagara Enterprise, we are a member of that group. They represent the 8 counties of Western New York. We pay them some money to belong to that. Previous administrative director was on the board there. They send out, if not weekly, every 2 weeks, a requests that come to them. A lot of them come from New York State. So the Project Little Apple example was looking for 40 acres, needs to be developable, needs to be near a highway, needs to have a certain size electric line, needs to have certain size gas line, sewer in place, water in place. So our staff keeps a database of sites. We responded, and these responses are due in like 2 days. I mean, you don't have a lot of time. So we got together, we sent all the information in to that. 2 months later, they called back asking for more information. You don't hear anything for 4 months. They called back and said, you're in the top 100 in Western New York. Wow, we're the top 100 sites. Wanted some more information. So we scramble, we get them the information. Then they wanted a tour, which the first tour we did not know about. They came down without us. We weren't involved. The rumor has it there was a black bus that pulled up on the pier in Dunkirk, and 40 Chinese people got out of the bus. They looked at Lake Erie. They loved it. They liked the site. They got back on the bus. They were touring a bunch of sites. They called us and said we were in the top 3, and then they called and said we didn't get it. Now, this is a year and a half. We've been working on that one just a year and a half later. Well, we were a little disappointed. Then they called back and said, the other 2 people didn't tell us the truth about what was available as far as utilities and things like that, so we became the preferred site. And that transaction, they purchased the property, and as Mike can get into the specifics about what New York State did for them, they are going to hire 420 people. George, first thing as elected, wanted to go meet with them. George has been to Buffalo and met with the chairman, right, George, and the president of the company, and was very excited about what he heard about what they're going to do here. So it takes a long time, but not all of them are that quick. I mean, some people call and say, if I can't move in 2 months, I don't want to be here. But this was a little more planful. But we respond to all of these requests that we get, and I've been blessed with a great staff, a lot of experience, and they're very responsive to their customers. Because they understand that, these are the people that make things happen. These are the people that employ people in the county. These are the people that pay the property taxes for the kids in the school, and the people that are in facilities that don't pay taxes, such as 202 projects for the elderly and the disabled. So they understand we have a very important role, and they take it very seriously.
By the way, not everybody may know what Athenic's going to do.
I'm going to defer to George. George, you have a much better handle on the actual product as you were just there. If you want to just talk about that for a minute.
This is your interview.
I know, but I know they're manufacturing drugs. They have 3 cancer drugs in clinical stage.
Yes, they have
trials.
Yes, they have basically a revolutionary chemotherapy drug that they're going to be producing that's patented. In addition to that, they do have some, we'll call more commodity type things that they're going to be dealing with, which they have a very unique space to be in as far as being able to supply it where others cannot. Right.
So again, 450 direct people in this facility. It's a 320,000 square foot facility. The initial cost was $208 million, and that's only to finish a third of the plant. The total project will be $1.6 billion when they're completed, and they hope to be manufacturing drugs and by the first or second quarter of 2020. Now the spin-offs from that will be amazing. They predict at least 450 jobs as well. But as George will tell you, and Mike, when we go out and visit a company, we say, yeah, well, who are you making that for? Well, I make that for SKF. Well, where do you get your boxes? Oh, Jamestown Container. Yeah. I mean, the multiplier effect for manufacturing is huge. One manufacturer, he buys a lot of things from other manufacturers in the community. It's not, other businesses don't have that. Like grocery stores buy some. I mean, they buy some things local, but most everything's coming from somewhere else. And that's not the case in manufacturing. They really support each other in the community with their products, their services, and so that's.
Well, also the concepts in manufacturing are first in time, just in time, lean manufacturing. So they look to their suppliers to be within close proximity of themselves for timing of deliveries and response. So that forces them also to buy things locally. But our manufacturers are great in that they are not selfish. No. They will work together. They'll take whereas maybe they might not be able to fulfill it, they'll call up their counterpart down the street, or maybe they'll get together and between the two of them they'll have enough capacity to fulfill the needs. So, and Rich does a lot of that interrelationships, and he, knowing the industrial base as he does, he can make those introductions. And so, again, a small project can become very big in Chautauqua County because of its multiplier effect.
Well, speaking about that smaller project, maybe, talk about Athenex. And Mike, you have the ear of the governor. I mean, you're a guy of such high stature. Talk about what New York State did to enhance the Athenex offer to bring them to Dunkirk.
Well, New York State, as you know, I laugh. I don't really have the ear of the governor. I'm on a council, which is one of 11 in New York State. We have regional councils. But the lieutenant governor, Kathy Hochul, sits on our committee. And what they did is they provided grants, which are a very small portion, but you would think it would be a large amount. But given the size of the project, and what those grants did was allow them to start and bridge them for the beginning of the project. So New York State has been extremely supportive in ensuring that these projects get started, because that's always the most difficult part of any of these, is to get them off the ground.
I'm looking at a book which I highly recommend that you pick up. It's called On the Move, Growing Our Economy. There are books over there. And it talks about some of the variety of projects which have been involved, Athenex being one of them. But also you talked about, Mike, segueing into the tourism destination. You may not have used that term, but do you want to talk about how, from a policy perspective, the Industrial Development Agency Board has kind of expanded beyond industrial to something more economic development?
Yes, we found that we were missing a segment of economic development. Given this area, we have a huge tourism base. And by not addressing that through the IDA, we were missing a lot of opportunities. And companies that came into the area that were tourism oriented or whatever didn't have the opportunities that we had within the industrial base. So it has been expanded. The IDA was instrumental in bringing the PGA to Peak and Peak. Now, people don't, they look at that and they say, well, what that means is for one solid week, every hotel is full. We have people coming in from all over the country. We're bringing, and the exposure that it provides Chautauqua County. The first year, there was the main tournament was under rain.
Yes, it got rained out in West
I
Virginia,
can
so
still
we were on
remember my
TV.
father calling me up and he goes, "You're on television." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I'm watching the tournament." And he lives in Rochester. But you can't buy that type of exposure. And that's what it does. So someone coming to this area for a tourism initiative may look to identify that this may be a good area to bring their company or to find suppliers. So we can't say enough for what that expansion has done to our footprint.
Also, along those lines, talk about the National Comedy Center, which is situate in Jamestown, of which the IDA, among other entities and foundations, and other organizations which, Mike, you've been involved in. What that project is now, so it's way beyond a proposal, it's reality. What that is, and then maybe some of the things which have followed closely behind that the IDA has been involved in.
Well, the IDA has been instrumental in not only helping them with their finances, but in bringing them to the proper tables, so that they were had the opportunity they've basically received approximately $25 million in grant funding, which means They do not have to pay this back. It's an excellent project. It's part of it fit into the West End development. It was one of the placeholders of the Jamestown Downtown Revitalization Initiative. So it's to bring people to Jamestown and to expose Jamestown nationally, where we haven't had that opportunity before. I'll let Rich talk to you about some of the financial specifics of the Comedy Center.
Yeah, early on, in order to take advantage of the tax credits that were available at the Comedy Center, it had to be owned by a for-profit entity. So they formed a for-profit entity. Greg, you were involved in that. Of course, as they ending up as a not-for-profit, they didn't want to pay property taxes. So we did work out a deal where we did a pilot agreement with them so they would pay no property taxes, but it would be owned by a for-profit corporation that could take advantage of the tax credits. These were historic federal tax credits, which they've received and sold, and they monetized that, and they have that money now. We had a tour today, as a matter of fact, with Andrew Nixon from the Visitors Bureau and a few other people, just to listen to Tom Benson about what is the message you want us to get out about the Comedy Center. They're 20 weeks away from opening, 20 weeks away. The ribbon cutting will be August 6th, and they're going to open whether the governor comes or not. They're ready. But it is a fabulous place, and it's a first-class operation. It's going to be very, very interactive. When you go in, you go to a kiosk, and you talk about your favorite comedian, and it asks you these questions. And then as you're walking through, it senses your badge, and it'll tell you a joke by your favorite comedian through a hologram. I mean, it's absolutely fabulous what they're going to be doing there. So they're very excited, and so are we.
As part of that meeting today, it was a gathering of a number of agencies designed to have an enhanced approach towards tourism destination in the Chautauqua County area, and certainly Jamestown. What was the message that they want them to give the ambassador? So the ambassador meets a guy like Mike Metzger, who comes in from Rochester, had never been here. What's the theme?
Well, the theme is that, comedy, this is a museum, but comedy is for everyone. There's a lot you can learn from comedy. We were getting into specifics today. For example, everyone should be aware of where to tell people to park. But the thing that I liked about it, Tom Benson says, we also need to be prepared to tell people what else there is to do. I mean, this isn't the casino mentality where they want to get you inside and close the doors and you don't leave till you don't have a dime. I mean, they want people to come in.
Is that a personal?
No, I try to keep Carol out of those places, Mike. But it was very inclusive about what should all the waitresses and the bartenders, and the Comedy Center has actually had the restaurant owners in to talk about it so that everyone's on the same page when the tourists do come. I'm sure at the Institute, you have the same thing here with your hotels and that everybody's on the same page with what they tell people when they come. So, that's what Jamestown is trying to do right now. There are some challenges with that, with the municipality, with some parking issues and sidewalk issues and lighting, but I think they'll get that all done. But the message is we're here, we're open for business, and there's a lot of things to do in this area, not just the Comedy Center.
You did know there's free parking at the Robert H. Jackson Center.
I did tell them that.
You're wondering how I could work this in, but here we go.
I knew you'd get it in sometime.
But along those same lines, Rich, both Mike and the board and the staff have encouraged the ancillary enhancements and new projects such as, the Hilton Doubletree, the Selron Harbor Hotel. Could you speak to that a little bit, maybe, Rich, if you could lead into that?
Yeah, the Chautauqua Harbor Hotel, which in this brochure says it's going to be a $24 million hotel. We're up to $38 million right now as we speak. Be 130 rooms with a 300-foot banquet facility right in Selron, right on the water. The pilings have been already pounded into the lake for a beautiful boardwalk that'll be open to the public. They'll also be open by July 4th. And they're very excited. Their market research and market studies show that this hotel will be better than their Clayton Harbor Hotel and the Watkins Glen Harbor Hotel, which are all 4-star, 4 diamonds. So they're very excited about being here. They've actually committed 600 and some square feet just for the Comedy Center to put their things in the hotel. David Hart is a wonderful man. He and Peter Kroger are partners in this venture. In Clayton this year, they had a Fire and Ice Festival with ice sculptures, and they had a vodka luge where you pour the vodka down through. They raised $50,000 for charity in that one weekend event.
Vodka luge, is that the next
Vodka luge,
Olympic?
that could be. So these are David is very community-minded. He's already talked about how he can partner with the Village of Celeron on fixing their park up and doing some other things. So it's very exciting that will be here too. That does a lot of things. I mean, a hotel room, 8% sales tax on every room, 5% bed tax. Use that money, go back into the lake, go back into other tourism events. So it's very exciting. They will definitely be one of the largest collectors of occupancy tax when they're open. So.
And that's Celeron, and then up the road on Washington Street, just up from the Comedy Center, is a totally rehabbed project. What's that?
That's a it'll be a Hilton Doubletree. By the Hammerster Group out of Buffalo. They purchased that out of bankruptcy. You and I were in the ice arena listening to the auction live when they bought that, Greg. How many years ago was that? Almost 3 or 4 years. Pardon me?
What was it previously?
It had been built as a Holiday Inn, and then it went, as it moved down the chain, as it got run down, I think it ended up as a Clarion. And then it went into bankruptcy, and it's been closed for at least 3 years. So this is a $14 million investment. And I want to give George Borello a plug here. George didn't wait till he was in office. He drove up to meet the Hamisters, to work with them on some issues they were having here. And we were able to get that deal done and closed and moving ahead. So I give George kudos for that. He was very proactive on that. So again, they're going to be paying a pilot payment there. We granted them sales tax abatement on the renovations. So again, very exciting to have that downtown facility. And just as an aside, Greg, when we helped them build the Holiday Inn Express out in the town of Ellicott by Moonbrook Country Club, and a lot of people said, well, why are you doing that? I said, we called our manufacturers and asked them, where are your people staying? And they said, if the Hampton Inn is busy, we send them to the Hampton Inn in Warren. I mean, we didn't have the quality of hotel that we needed for, we have a lot of corporate headquarters here. We have Trucklight, their research and development here, over 400 employees. They have factories all over the United States, but this is home. This is R&D, this is the corporate office. SKF, this is the North American headquarters for the Aero Engine Division, where they make the aero bearings for aircraft. So we have a lot of high-tech companies that bring a lot of people in. So we found the need for the hotel. And it's interesting, some of the foreign companies that come from Sweden or France came, after work in the evening, they didn't want to go anywhere where they had to drive. So they weren't happy that there weren't any hotels close to the restaurant. So I think this is going to be very good for downtown Jamestown, as there are more hotels opening there and there are more restaurants opening, that we'll see a very busy and vibrant downtown Jamestown.
And consistent with that tourism destination, of course, Chautauqua we know as far as such a draw, but that has also led to additional activity just up the road in Mayville. The IDA has taken a lot of preliminary action, and you want to talk a little bit about what's projected there?
George and I met with Ben Webb yesterday, actually, and he took us up to Mayville, where he plans to build hotel units, fractionalized hotel with fractionalized ownership. So he's very excited about that. He will be starting his Whisper campaign soon. And he has to get one more zoning variance, I think, taken care of. But very exciting to be right on the lake with another project like that. So that's springing up too. So.
By the way, that's why we have listen to the songs out there. Rich, I want to let you know, that's why we have security in the front door. Yeah. They're out there now, I've been told. So, Mike, what's next for you? You are on the board, I'm going to segue, you're on the board of Chautauqua. Mm-hmm. Where do you see the Industrial Development Agency, where you're the chair, and Chautauqua integrate to kind of expand and enhance tourism destination programming. Have you given thought to that?
No. I'll admit, I just got onto the board, and he was here, that there's opportunities for the IDA to participate in programs at Chautauqua, but Chautauqua's been fortunate in that they have been able to be extremely successful on their own. The IDA is there if there is such a need going in the future. And the Chautauqua board is currently in their next strategic planning phase. So hopefully the idea of Chautauqua is to expand past its gates, and there would be opportunity there.
Do you see at some point where, in fact, the manufacturers could put on sort of a, I don't want to say a trade show, but an opportunity on the grounds? Because there are so many folks in residence here who are from outside the area, who are CEOs, CFOs, people of influence, just to really know what it is that you know, what George knows, Rich, what you know, and to share that word. Do you envision that could be a possible programmatic aspect?
That could definitely be an opportunity here, yes, especially in the off-season as Chautauqua's looking to utilize their facilities year-round. And the manufacturers, of course, are always looking for venues for their events.
So, now that you've had a chance to work with Rich, any words of advice for him?
Actually, I get all my advice from Rich. I'll be honest, Rich has been a tremendous resource, and I don't know what we do without Rich. He's been able to navigate through a couple of different administrations, and so he's an extremely valuable resource and facilitator for the board. The IDA, we basically have a toolkit, and that's what we're there for. The generation of the projects and the interaction is what George and his economic development and Rich do. And we've been fortunate at the IDA to have some very valuable and instrumental projects to participate in.
And I just want to say one thing about Chautauqua, Greg. We do have a loan with the Athenaeum Hotel, which is owned by a for-profit corporation. There is an IDA loan with that, so we are involved with the Institute, and so we do have
Yes,
that
that's right.
on our books.
Yeah, it was a $1 million project cost, the hotel room renovations, the Athenaeum Hotel upgrade, and when you get this book, of which I'm sure you will see that is project number 1 in this book. So, if you
Starts with A.
So, Rich, I do want you to know, as we draw closure to this, that the last time we had an event here with Mike Metzger, it was a few years ago, and it was Mike with Vince Horrigan. And after that, shortly thereafter, Vince decided no longer to be in public service. So, how do you feel?
I'm excited. I'm excited about George's vision, because I've always been a firm believer, and I told Vince this when Vince came in. If you're looking for somebody to get on the plane and go out and try to bring a 500 job company here, I'm not your guy. Okay, that's not what I'll do. But I'll go visit the 300 companies you have here, and we'll try to create 500 jobs. And I enjoy that. I think that's where our future lies. Quite frankly, I've spent a lot of time with site selectors, and site selectors will tell you their customer comes to them and says, I want to be in this 70-mile circle. So they know where they want to go. And if, like Athenex, when they called us and they knew they wanted to be in Western New York, we competed and we won. So that's how we will get people here. But to go out and actually recruit business, I mean, George's idea of being ready to be open for business, I mean, I will tell you, people read the newspaper. I mean, I've had controllers from large corporations would call me because of the headline in the Post-Journal and say, you got to be kidding me. mean, people pay attention to the local news where they have facilities. And it's mindful for all politicians, George and everyone included. You have to be careful what you say because people are watching and people are listening. We had a prime example of that today at our board meeting where one of the business that came in and they were a little leery, but we were able to convince them to come in and invest because they had read the papers. So it's important, that's very important, the perception that, and I love George's, direction of we're open for business, we're here to help you. And George early on was a little naive about going to these businesses, that he was taking up too much of their time. And I told George, you've been able to get me into a business that I've tried to get in for 2 years. When the county executive says he wants to see you, it's a big deal. And George said to me on one of the visits, well, we really don't need to see the plant. And I said, George, we have to see the plant. The plant manager has told every foreman out there, you're coming. The place has never been cleaner, and they are so proud to show you what they do. And it's been amazing, hasn't it, George? I mean, they've welcomed George with open arms, and they know he cares. So I think I'm still excited about it, and I'm not going anywhere unless Carol tells me to. So.
Any final word, Mike, Rich, to this august group? I mean, this is high-quality people that you're talking to.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for coming out to hear us. It's much appreciated. But this, as Rich has stated, this is just the beginning of where we're going to be going forward. We're never looking back. We're always looking forward, and we're building on our successes from the past, and we're learning on the issues that we've had that we can correct. But there's a lot of opportunity in Chautauqua County, and look forward to a great future with under George's leadership.
Yep.
Now, before we all clap, and we will, we will, right? Okay.
Yeah.
The lead into the autobiography of Rich Dixon was that his Myers-Briggs says he was introverted.
Yes.
Did you see any of that tonight?
I've never seen it anytime.
I'm an INFJ, I really am. I'm an INFJ. So.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Metzger, Rich Dixon, thank you.
Thank you. Well, great job.